Our guest this Shabbat, our scholar in residence, is Rabbi Dr. Donniel Hartman. Before I say a few words about Donniel, I would like to say a few words about the institute that he is the president of, and I'm sure that he would appreciate you learning more about the institute than learning about him. The Shalom Hartman Institute is a leading center of Jewish thought and education serving Israel and North America. Their mission is to strengthen Jewish peoplehood, Jewish identity, and pluralism, to enhance the Jewish and democratic character of Israel, and to ensure that Judaism is a compelling force for good in the 21st century. Their work focuses on Judaism and modernity, Judaism and democracy, Judaism and ethics, and in the public sphere. And the Institute has 5 independent but interrelated centers. I will tell you that the work of this institute goes way beyond its borders, and it is influencing Jewish thinkers, Jewish teachers, and the Jewish people, not to mention Christians and Muslims also throughout the world, because their message is a message for humanity in the 21st century, but it's deeply rooted in the values, narratives of our people. Now, a little bit about Donniel. It's very personal, actually, for me to introduce him because of my great love for Donniel as a friend. We first met about 15 years ago when I entered into one of their rabbinic study programs in Jerusalem. I knew I would like this guy as a friend, but before I got to know him as a friend, I heard from him as a teacher. And I was inspired. I was inspired because the words he spoke were words that truly entered my heart. They were words that reflected the things that I valued and believed about Judaism, the Jewish people, and Israel. And it was framed in a language that was both contemporary but deeply rooted in Jewish text and Jewish tradition. After that first summer, we did become friends, and I think Donniel has been here more than any other scholar in residence over the years, and it is really a gift. It's a gift to me. It's a gift to all of you. As I said last night, I believe he's one of the most sought-after Jewish thinkers in the world, so we're really privileged to have him here. So I will say no more, but I thank you, Donniel, for being here, for coming, and for sharing with us. Donniel will be speaking now about a particular issue confronting the Jews of this country, the Jews perhaps of the diaspora, and then after Kiddush in the Wiener Cultural Center, he will be speaking about Ukraine and Israel. So, Donniel, please come on up.
Shabbat Shalom. It's nice to be back here again and to see you and to think together and to talk together about some of the issues that are concerning us and some of the issues that ought to be concerning us. When someone asks me, Donniel, why do you love Israel? My answer is, because I'm a Jew. And when they say to me, excuse me, I didn't ask you who you are, I asked you why you love Israel. And I say, because I'm a Jew. I am a Jew, but I also love Israel because I am a Jew. I'm not assuming that every Jew has to love Israel. Everybody who loves Israel is a Jew. Donniel, why do you love Israel? Because I'm a Jew. Because an essential part of my Jewishness has nothing to do with God, has nothing to do with ritual, has nothing to do with the food I eat, and even the values that I'm committed to. An essential part of my Jewishness is simply a connection to my people, a people who I have walked together with for 3,000 years, a people who claim me. Donniel, do you agree with everything that Israel does? No. Does it matter? In one sense it matters, and in another sense it doesn't matter at all. Do you love Israel? Yes. Do you agree with everything that Israel does? No. Do you still love Israel? Yes. How? Why? Sometimes it's difficult. It's not always simple. But my love is unconditional. My loyalty is unconditional. But there's a whole generation, and it's not just generation. There are now major swaths of the Jewish community who won't say what I just said, who don't feel that love and don't feel that loyalty. And very often it is precisely, why are you disloyal? Why are you disconnecting? And the answer is, because I'm a Jew. Because a Jew, I'm committed to values of seeing all human beings as created in the image of God. As a Jew, I'm committed to peace. As a Jew, I'm committed to equality. As a Jew, I'm committed to pluralism. And Israel is underachieving. Now, what do we do when we enter into such a conversation? What do you do when you talk to your children and your grandchildren? Now, especially for us, for whom it is so self-evident, my loyalty is guaranteed. How do I even begin a conversation for somebody for whom my most core assumptions of my Jewish soul, and that is I am part of a people which claims me. And as you all know, and I've said in prior years, one of the unique features of Judaism is that Christianity, there is only a Christian community after Jesus walks on earth. You could only be a member of a Christian community as long as Christianity exists, and when you commit yourself to Christianity, there could only be an Islamic nation if Islam exists. But we are part of a religion where Jews existed before Judaism. Judaism is the name of the religion which is adopted by the Jewish people. We are not Jewish people by virtue of adopting a religion called Judaism. It's a little strange, I know. But that's who we are. I'm claimed. I belong somewhere. And it comes before my faith and it comes before my practice. And this is so deep in my soul. And then today I say I could speak this way and I could move myself deeply and be unbelievably excited by everything that I say. And someone could simply say to me, no. Do you feel that way? No. And we don't know what to say. Because how do you talk when your most core assumptions, very often primordial assumptions that you can't even explain, are questioned by people? How do you talk? Now, we're really challenged today as a people when it comes to talking. We don't know how to talk with people anymore. We only know how to talk with people who agree with us. That's all we want to talk about. That's all we want to talk to. And when we talk with each other, we want to talk about them. Life's great. We get together with those who agree with us and talk about them. That's all we know how to do. We don't read about them. We don't listen. We consume our information from different sites, and we are living in our own insulated bubbles, perpetually delegitimizing and canceling the other. And we do so with a profound amount of self-righteousness. Profound. Now, what happens when I'm not encountering as a Democrat or a Republican? Or what happens as a Republican when not when I'm encountering a Democrat, but when I'm encountering my kid? When I'm encountering my grandchild? We don't have the tools because all we know how to do today is cancel. All we know how to do is delegitimize. We don't know how to talk. We don't know how to share. So what do? If we don't learn how to talk about Israel with Jews who don't have the essential presumptions that I have, then what are we going to do? Then a small group of pro-Israel community will get together, we'll start our own organizations, and you can call them whatever alphabet you want, and we'll get together and we'll have national conferences. Some of them could be in Miami, some of them could be Washington, they could be whatever they may be, and we'll all get together and we'll be really excited, and if we have a lot of people, we'll feel really we're the norm, and everybody who's not here just doesn't get it. And they're not even worthy. But they're my children. They're my grandchildren. And people over and over again ask me, Donniel, what should I say? How do I change my grandchild? What could I tell them? And the first thing I tell people is stop talking. Start listening. I said, shh. But they don't know. I have so many books that I want them to read. I have so many facts that I need them to understand because they weren't there when, and I say, shh. The first thing you have to do, if you want to talk with somebody, you have to convince them that you have heard them. But in our political discourse, we don't do that. I have an answer. What's your question? If you don't agree with me, you're flawed. If you don't agree with me, there's something that you don't know. The purpose of a discussion is not to hear and talk with each other. It's for me to change you. It's like the bad caricature of a therapist. What's a good couple therapist? The one who will tell my wife that she's wrong. That's what we do. And we want to know how we're not listening. Why should a generation of Jews enter into a conversation about Israel if the presumption is that they are flawed? And so instead of talking with each other, we have names for each other. A lot of them are the A words. Oh, you're thinking this about Israel, you're an anti-Semite. Oh, you're supporting Israel or you're supporting apartheid. And we have all the A words, which are basically not words that are meant to enable understanding. They're words that are foundations for stopping a conversation and for mutual delegitimization. So the first thing, shh. Listen. Don't come into the conversation with the presumption that the other person is wrong, because if you do so, the community of the pro-Israel community in America will die out in 30 years. But how do I listen to that which I do believe is so fundamentally wrong? Is it that our children just completely don't get it? Is there something that they don't understand? Well, I want to argue today that there's nothing that they don't understand. They just understand differently. And understanding differently is not a mistake. Understanding differently is a byproduct of a different psychological and different intellectual milieu within which we have raised our children. Let me just give you one example. Because if I'm asking for a different conversation, what we need to learn how to do is not just to listen, we also have to hear and respect. Because if I don't respect you, if I don't respect someone else, there is no reason why they should ever listen to me. Let me just give you one example of what I mean, and there are many. I was raised in an environment in which the love of Israel and a loyalty to Israel is a self-evident truth. Because Israel is my family. I was raised, as painful as it was, that Donniel, you have to be willing to die for Israel. You have to be willing to fight and to do everything to protect your family. And as many of you know, because I've been here for many years, I don't use one eye. And I remember as an 18-year-old going into the draft office and they made me a non-combat soldier because they said seeing is kind of essential. So I went back and asked to be retested and cheated on my eye exam so that eventually I could become a tank commander and be the eyes of a tank. Stupid. But for me, if I wasn't going to be willing to fight for Israel, I wasn't fulfilling my core responsibility. It's my family. And I was blessed to live in a generation where a Jew could defend themselves. And I wanted to be a part of that. This is my family. And I would do the same thing for my brother, and I would do the same thing for my sister and for my mother and my parents. It's mishpacha, I'm family. But when I think about the parallel between my family and the state of Israel, I think about brothers and sisters living in their parents' house, living rooms next to each other. Maybe if you're not that affluent, you have to share a bathroom, and the argument is who gets where, and you used my towel, and where did you put the toothpaste, and you didn't cover it, and all the little quabbles that brothers and sisters might have. But what do? As you, the bar mitzvah voice said so beautifully, you're with me. You're with me all the time. The model is a model of a family in which we're young, living in the same family. But let's take the model of brothers and sisters for a second. What happens when we grow up? What happens when we get a little older? What happens when we get married or have a significant other? What happens when we move out of the house? Is my relationship to my brother and sister the same? I hope not. Because part of the process of growing up is I begin to create another family. My first family is there, and I don't just simply add on to it. That's nice, but it's not true. I create a new nuclear family. So if, for example, my brother is rude to my wife, I'm not going to invite my brother into my house. The relationship gets more complicated. Our children, our grandchildren, were raised by us to belong to more than just the Jewish family. We raised them to be Americans and Canadians. We raised them to love America and to love Canada. And to see America and Canada not just as a place where Jews live, but as my family, as my home. Now, what happens when you have more than one family, more than one home? It's not so simple anymore. I don't have a singular identity, an overarching one which all that it does is claim me. You have two flags here. And we raise our children in this complexity. Now, Israel sometimes doesn't understand you, just like you don't understand your grandchildren. So many years ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu comes to the Congress and says, the greatest existential danger facing Israel right now is a nuclear deal with Iran. and he critiques the deal, and he critiques the President of the United States, and he says to the Jewish community, support me. Why should you support me? Because we are family. I'm your brother. And you should be standing with me. But when Netanyahu criticized President Obama, he wasn't just criticizing the President of the United States. From the perspective of the majority of North American Jews, he was critiquing their president. I have multiple loyalties. Now, when I have a singular loyalty, I am going to be connected to Israel. I am going to be loyal to Israel regardless of what it does. But if I have more than one loyalty, if Israel wants to claim me, it has to earn my loyalty. By raising our children and our grandchildren to be Americans and Canadians, to feel at home, to have multiple identities, we cannot claim or expect unconditional loyalty. That only works when if you either have a singular loyalty, one family, or one family is dominant. When you have multiple ones, then which family you spend time with? Where do you go? What's their relationship with each other? Becomes a question of what you experience when you're there. In North American Jewish life, if we want the Jewish people to be Jewish, we want them to love Judaism, it has to be a liberal Judaism. If all you had in America was orthodoxy, almost no one is becoming Orthodox who's not Orthodox today. There are those who are Orthodox who are leaving Orthodoxy. There's almost no move from non-Orthodoxy to Orthodoxy. Why? Because for liberal Jews, for whom essential values of human rights, human dignity, the need and the validity of my own consciousness, my own perception of self, pluralism, have to find a place in Judaism. If you don't have a Judaism that speaks to me and is willing to bend and adapt according to my values, it's not a Judaism that I'm going to accept. And so it's self-evident. And orthodoxy in America is about 8%, and the vast majority of Jews are liberal Jews. And it's self-evident that our Judaism has to be a liberal Judaism. But if we want our kids to connect to Israel, it also has to be a liberal Zionism. If Jews are only going to be Jewish, if Judaism is liberal, they're only going to be lovers of Israel if the Israel conversation is a liberal one, which speaks about human rights, which speaks about freedom, which speaks about human equality, which speaks of religious freedom. So when you ask me, Donniel, do you love Israel? Why? Because I'm a Jew. Do you agree with everything that Israel does? No. Does it matter? No. We raised our children with a tool set which is completely different. We didn't raise them with that singular identity. And that's one of the great gifts of America. And you can't turn it back any more than you could say to your kids, okay, I want you to be Orthodox. It's just not the way we raise them. They are not a failure, they are a success. This is what we educated them to be. And when you have multiple families, each family has to earn loyalty, and you can no longer assume it. So when we cancel, when we stop listening, when we call them names, do you know what they're going to do? They're just going to go to the family that doesn't call them names. They're going to go to the family that doesn't cancel them. And that family is there. Liberal America welcomes the Jewish people, and it's one of the most unique features of America, how much we feel at home. And how even though we're still frightened or we're becoming increasingly frightened with growing anti-Semitic events, we are still at home here. So how do you talk to your kids? First, listen. Make them understand that you're listening, that you're not judging, that you actually want to hear what they have to say, and that you're not assuming that they're wrong before they even open their mouth. Stop assuming that millennialism is a disease. Oh, you have millennialism. Oh. You have a millennial. Oh, I'm sorry. And then stop assuming that you're the doctor who's going to repair them. Start by listening. And then understand that the way you love Israel is not the way the next generation of Jews is going to love Israel. The way it is right now, we are inheriting a Zionism and a Jewish discourse that our children cannot participate in. And you're not going to change your children. What you can do is change the discourse. Change the way we talk. For them right now, if Israel doesn't change its policies, they do not know how, or they actually do know, that they cannot have a relationship with Israel. For me, I am deeply upset about the occupation. I'm deeply upset at the way Israel treats its minorities. I am deeply upset about the relationship between state and religion in Israel. Do I still love Israel? Yes. And my love is expressed in fighting for the Israel that I need and want. Your children and grandchildren have to feel that you're willing to partner with them in fighting for the Israel that they need. And understand that the loyalty is not the way you begin the conversation. A relationship with Israel is not a declaration of loyalty. It has to be a declaration of aspirations. Now, are you willing to walk with your children? Are you willing to stop canceling your grandchildren psychologically? Are you willing to stop assuming that the next generation of Jews are somehow deficient and diseased? Maybe they understand something, and they do. Are you willing to transcend the disease of political discourse that has taken hold in this country? You can't build a country that way. We can't build a community that way. If to be a Jew is to be a part of a people, just like being an American is to be part of a people, you can't cancel people. It's just not the way you conduct yourself. Oh, it makes you feel good. It keeps your world in order. But it's not the way you build a healthy society. But leaving America aside, I love Israel because I'm a Jew. I love my people because I'm a Jew. I love and am committed to my children and grandchildren because I'm a Jew. That's going to require of me to open up my soul and to listen and to begin to talk differently. You can do it. You just have to open yourself a little wider. You have to understand, and I just use the example of family, that they're not wrong. We just raise them differently. There's a new Jew walking on the earth, a Jew with multiple families, a Jew who feels at home in multiple places. And our job, our challenge, is how do we make them feel at home, not only in Judaism, but also in Zionism. And we're the guides. But to do that, instead of canceling them, You have to cancel your presumptions of self-righteousness and engage in a new conversation with generations of Jews who haven't left. They just want to know, is someone hearing me? Are you hearing me? And then please talk to me. Shabbat shalom.